On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder get embarrassed by the Dallas Mavericks and they shake up their roster, all coming up on today's show.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for InsideTheThunder.com, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder being embarrassed by the Dallas Mavericks. What went wrong in this game for the Thunder? What went wrong in this game just in general, and also the roster gets shaken up a little bit. So this is a bonus podcast, doing it for the sixth time this week, seventh time tomorrow after the Kings game. Drove to Dallas and back today after that game, so this might be a shorter episode. We'll see. Every time I say that, though, we usually get to rambling and yapping, and it goes long. But the bottom line is, against the Mavericks, multiple things can be true. It can be true that the Thunder have struggled in afternoon games this entire season, that they've struggled in afternoon games for a long time now, that they didn't play good enough defense from a team level to win this game or to even compete, really. They gave up 50 points in the first quarter, nearly 47 to be exact. That's not good enough. It can also be true that Josh Giddey was not good, but that Josh Giddey was not the only reason why the Thunder were just blown out and embarrassed in this game. So it doesn't have to just be one thing that you look at and kind of cast everything on. The Mavericks hit a lot of tough shots in this game. They also were able to get to their spots with ease. I mean, when you let up, no matter how it's done, whether it's tough shot making or open shots, when you let up 58% from the floor, 39% from three, and then 75% at the line. But when you let up 58% at the floor, you're not going to win those games. More often than not, you're not going to win those games. And the Thunder were dreadful offensively. 38% from the floor, 36% from three. They just weren't good. They were not good in the paint. They couldn't get into the paint against Dallas, even without Derek Lively. Of course, they actually won the second chance points battle in this game, but they were dominated in fast break. Listen to this. Fast break. Dallas is cruising 33-2. That's just not how the Thunder play basketball. That's not their style. Out rebounded by 14 rebounds. They had a +2 turnover differential, which was good for them. But the Mavericks go wire to wire in this game, and at one point grow a 41-point lead in honor of Dirk. There just isn't much to say when you play that way. And you can get into it. Lu Dort was not good offensively. Really, not many were good offensively for the Thunder. Josh Giddey was not good in this game. But as a collective unit, when you play defense that way, you're going to lose. It doesn't really matter what happens on the other end of the floor. But then the other end of the floor did happen, though. So it's kind of a double whammy. The Thunder, first and foremost, have to get better at afternoon games, have to get better at preparing for these games and coming out with urgency in these games. And I asked Shea about what the rhythms and routines are, might be thrown off a little bit. And Chet was very candid about, sometimes, of course, your routine is different. You don't have the whole day to prepare. You don't have the whole day to watch film. And all those things are either crammed in or skipped entirely. Like the Thunder don't do shoot around, of course, before a 2:00 game. And they don't have time to. So, that changes how you prepare for a game and get ready for a game. But they've got to figure that part out. It only happens a couple times in the regular season, in the grand scheme of things, a couple times, a handful of times in an 82-game season. But you could run into a playoff series where it happens, 2-3 times. You can see it happen a lot in a playoff series, just depending on how the travel breaks, just depending upon when the series starts and how many afternoon games there are on the weekends, weekend dates that there are. You can see it happen a lot where pivotal, series shifting games happen before a typical 7 o'clock start. So It's a minor thing right now. You're only going to play a few in the regular season. To this point, they've played 3 afternoon games. It's not a big sample size. It's not something that is just abhorrent, because it could just be as simple as a coincidence they wouldn't have the juice these 3 nights anyway. They just so happen to be played at 2. But it is something that should be monitored and turned around for Oklahoma City. But that all is true. The defense was not good enough. The offense was not good enough. The energy was not good enough. The urgency was not good enough. The preparation was not good enough. None of it was good enough. And they'll admit that from top to bottom. And it doesn't fall on one person. It doesn't fall on only Josh Giddey. It doesn't fall on only Lou Dort. It doesn't fall on only whoever you want to point to. As a matter of fact, you can kind of whittle the list down to a few guys who had even good games. I thought Cason Wallace was incredible in this game, provided a real spark defensively, especially for a rookie going up against a very talented offense in Dallas. He was really good at contesting and just bringing some sort of physicality to the defensive end. And then offensively, he was much more assertive of himself into the course of play, which has been something that rookies tend to lack or be behind on, which is just the normal course of being in the NBA. But today he was really aggressive, something that you like to see from him. He had 15 points in this game and a couple rebounds, and he was just really good. SGA, like, he was slowed down by his standards because he didn't have a 30-point game, but he played less than 30 minutes, and he still got to 25 points on very efficient shooting, 56% from the floor. Besides those two, Lindy Waters was fine in garbage time. Olivier Sarr was fine in garbage time, but this game was just a whole lot of just bad. Chet had 13 and 12, but whenever you let Daniel Gafford look like an All-NBA player, whenever you have a Luka Doncic who's just going to light it up and not miss and play excellent basketball like he can. Kyrie had a really good game. But whenever Daniel Gafford comes off the bench and he's able to post 14 points for PJ Washington, and for Gafford post 18 points for him, like, those are two guys who literally got off a plane and stepped into this locker room, stepped into this court, and were able to make a big impact for Dallas. So that just kind of shows you the lack of energy, the lack of preparation for Oklahoma City as a whole. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, two things can be true. It can both be that those things weren't well, and then also that Josh Giddey was not good. We're going to talk about him and the rest of the Thunder team coming up. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at LinkedIn. Check them out today by going to linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA, because you can post your business, job opportunity for free at linkedin.com. And the reason why I love linkedin.com is because they make the hiring process so easy. We get it. If you're a small business owner, you're wearing so many different hats. You've got so many responsibilities. That's why they want to make the hiring process easier for you and save you time and get you the resources that you need to make a very qualified hire. And that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. LinkedIn is consistently finding ways to make the process easier. They even have launched a feature that help you write job descriptions and make the process even quicker to get to your qualified candidates. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. You look at this game from Oklahoma City, and it just was not good. And a lot of the ire is going to be drawn to Josh Giddey, and rightfully so. Like, it is what it is. It was not a good Josh Giddey game. We can sit here and rehash the same old conversation about Josh Giddey. And as a 5-day-week podcast, we do that plenty. We talk about him plenty on this podcast. But whenever your shots aren't falling and they're just leaving you alone on the perimeter, that's obviously going to hurt everyone else on the court. Whenever it's gotten to the point where your opponents are looking at you on the perimeter, and instead of contesting, they're just kind of waving you off and letting you shoot, that's not great. Defensively, he has limitations, which we already have known about his whole career, which is not a big deal, because whenever it is a big deal, but whenever he is locked in and he's engaged, he's able to combat those. Honestly, I mean, whenever he is engaged and he is active defensively, he has a good enough frame to be a team defender. Here's the problem with a team defender, though. That's great whenever everyone else is playing good defense. When the 4 other guys are playing good defense, the team defender's fine at the 5th spot. The problem is in games like this, in games like Detroit, in games, like the Denver home opener, when you're not playing good defense as the other 4, when they're not playing to their standards and they're not playing to their capabilities, of course, the 5th and worst defender on the court is also going to get exposed. That's not rocket science in this case. The offense is the main concern here. And to flip the Josh Giddey conversation, we know the limitations of, like, even if he did shoot the ball from 3, I just don't believe that that's the difference for Josh Giddey. Because 3 for 9, sure, he had wide open shots, and you wish that he would have cashed in on those. But 3 or 4 makes is the most you can ask for Josh Giddey in a single game. Because that's a lot of makes for anyone, but especially for like a non-sharp shooter for Josh Giddey. Defenses are going to continue to live like this and just let Josh Giddey have a free 9-point burst whenever they come for the benefit of playing for 48 minutes, packing the paint, not allowing the Thunder to drive, not allowing the Thunder to cut, and not allowing the Thunder to dominate points in the paint as they have throughout the season. So the concern with Josh Giddey for me is the fact that this was a matchup where I believed that he would be able to have success. I even wrote about it. I did send the for Styles Points on Saturday morning. You look at the Mavericks, and they looked like a matchup where Josh Giddey could find a groove because they're similar to the Raptors in the sense of Josh Giddey should be able to thrive against non-elite rim protectors. He just should. Like, he should be able to use that space to get to the rim and finish. Now, the problem with Josh Giddey has been against Rudy Gobert, against Kristaps Porzingis, against these guys who are elite rim protectors. He can't drive into that space, and he can't hit threes at a super duper high percentage. Or if he is hitting at a good percentage, it's not enough volume. So like when the volume goes up to like 9 attempts, the percentage drops way down. So he doesn't have enough of that 3-point threat to beat you. And it's not just Josh Giddey. This happens with every player. Going back again, I'll use it to kind of compare it because I know that sometimes it can feel isolating to Josh Giddey. Last year with Jay Will shooting 40% the whole season, nobody defended Jay Will on the 3-point line because, okay, he's shooting 40%. He might make 1 or 2 a game. You live with it. At most he'll make 3. So at most you give up 9 points for the benefit of it, of playing defense, off of him at the perimeter. So it happens to every player, even players who like on their career have good shooting numbers, which Josh Giddey, it's no secret doesn't. But whenever you play a team who does not have that elite shot blocker, because Lively was out and they had Gafford, who was a really, really good addition, looked awesome with this team, and these pieces are fitting great. Now, of course, this was a night where everything went the Mavericks' way, so hopefully those additions will look great, and they did. But what's concerning the most is that now you're seeing games where even against non-threatening paint presence, Josh still can't get it going. I believe that Josh Giddey is a good basketball player. I believe that Josh Giddey can perform well in the NBA. It's impossible to watch these 50 games and not question if he can reach his individual potential. We always talk about this from the Thunder side, but his individual potential in Oklahoma City. Now, it's been 50 games. I still believe that we're in the hypothesis point of the scientific process. You shouldn't think that it's all over and that there's no way it works out. You can guess one way or the other. If you think it can work out, if you think it won't work out, you can make that educated hypothesis. But you still got to go through the scientific process to see if that hypothesis ends up being correct. But it's impossible not to question things right now about Josh Giddey's fit. It's also important to balance it out of this is a guy who's only 21 years old, who's having to change his entire role for the 3rd straight season in the NBA, who's been asked to do the most sacrificial stuff of this grouping, right, of this core. And this is also a roster, though, where SGA is at his best with the ball in his hands. Jalen Williams is the best with the ball in the hands. And theoretically, Josh Giddey's at his best with the ball in his hands. And there's only one basketball. You've got to work all that out. And, Rome wasn't built in a day. Even the Heatles didn't get it right their very first season or their very first month or their first handful of games. They ended up going to the finals and losing to JJ Barea, but that's a different conversation. you know, this is something that can take time. And when you're watching the season unfold before your eyes, game in and game out, it can feel so burdening of watching these mistakes happen, because the mistakes, or the missed threes, or the timely misses, and the runs when he's on the court and everything, it's a pattern in losses especially. So then you look, you start to reflect on the other, 16, 17 losses on the year, and you start saying, well, it's kind of the same story. However, they also have 36 wins this season, and he's also had some flashes of great games, like in Toronto, like against Toronto, I should say, in double overtime, where he was a massive part of the win, and the Thunder don't get that win without Josh Giddey. So I would say that the biggest thing to me is put in your hypothesis, and frankly, based upon this season's data points that we're going to judge off of, I could see still being optimistic that things can figure it out. But I can also see, if your hypothesis right now is that this cannot work, and that this is not going to be a good fit for either side, for Josh individually or for the team as a whole. I could see either prediction, being rationally and well thought out. The discourse has gotten to a point where it's not rational. It's kind of like way too extreme, of like either Josh can do no wrong, or Josh is the problem fully. In a game like tonight, Josh Giddey was not the full problem. He was a part of the problem, because of course, if Josh Giddey went 8 for 9 from 3, hypothetically, this game turns on its head. But if Lou Dort goes, instead of going 1 for 6 from 3, if he goes 3 for 6 from 3, and those three hits come in the more beginning part of the game to set the tone, right? That changes things. If the Thunder can play a lick of defense, that changes things. Yes, I mentioned that during the game, Luka hit some very tough shots, especially early on, and that can be deflating, that can be demoralizing. But they also, at times, just walked to where they wanted to go and had little to no resistance. So if the team played better defense, that helps things too. So you can be in the middle and be correct. You don't have to take any opinion and go to the extreme for the sake of going to the extreme. Josh Giddey was a problem today. Dort shooting was a problem today. The lack of defensive effort was a problem today. The fact that the Mavericks couldn't miss was a problem today. It all was a problem. Josh Giddey's problem has been more prevalent, throughout the season, because the Thunder have a top 5 defense in the NBA, top 5 offense in the NBA. So those other things have worked more often than not, whereas Josh Giddey has admitted so that he's played more bad than good this year. And I think that you can get to a point too where it's, the criticism is so loud of Josh Giddey, when in reality, this just might not be a good fit. And that happens in the NBA all the time. But it's been 50 games. And we can get lost in the tree, the forest of the trees, or however that saying goes, and want it all to fix itself perfectly and mirror up perfectly after 50 games. I know that it gets, again, living day to day, it gets, burdening, I guess I could say again, about how every one of the teams performing each day. But it's been 50 games, and they've had to adjust to the new rules. They've had to adjust to a new system, in the sense of, same system as a granular scheme, but incorporating Chet in the system does change things. So he has different skill sets than the bigs that you were playing with last year. J-Dub taking the step as a creator, getting back to his more college roots as a creator, and then just as a scorer for himself, creating for himself, much less others. That's a different wrinkle that was not there last year. Remember last year, the conversation at this time at the All-Star break was that you were hoping that J-Dub could become more aggressive and become more assertive into the offense. So all these things have changed right before our eyes. And again, for Josh Giddey, the team itself has changed year over year over year. And, you go back in his basketball life, right? And we're just talking on the court with Josh Giddey. He goes from the NBL to the NBA. That's a massive change. New country, new rules, new basketball, and new everything, right? Then you go to year 2, where you go from, there was structure in year 1. The Thunder have always done a really good job of, even in those seasons where they were losing more games than winning, they were very structured and organized. But in year 2, you start playing in bigger games. You start to creep into finding your fit next to Shea and J-Dub. As Shea takes a massive leap, J-Dub was still on par or even behind Giddey last year at times. And the dynamic was just entirely different to now you've got to incorporate Chet, but you're also incorporating a brand new J-Dub. Like, yes, Josh Giddey and J-Dub did play together all last year, but this is not the same J-Dub as last year. This isn't even the same Shea as last year. This is a more improved version of Shea, even though the stats aren't as glaringly improved the way that J-Dubs are. This is a much more improved player, especially as a lead ball handler, as a true point guard. So it all intertwines together. I think it's perfectly fine to have a guess one way or the other. Someone's going to be proven right. Either this is going to work and it's going to get turned around and there's going to be some egg on the face, or the trend is going to continue to go the way it has so far, and the other side will be vindicated. I have a lot of questions of if this can work or if this will work, because we've seen it work in small doses. Can it work over a sustained period of time whenever defenses can always revert back to just simply not guarding Josh Giddey? Because even in a 7-game playoff series where you only need to get hot and win 4 games, the odds of Josh Giddey going 4 for 6 from 3-point land in a playoffs game, it can happen, but the odds of it happening 4 times in 7 games is a calculated risk worth taking right now for the sake of being able to pack the paint and play off of him. So, I am interested to see how they're able to fix and force the defenses to change how they're defending Josh Giddey. And there are some wrinkles to do that. Use Josh Giddey as a screener more. Use Josh Giddey as a cutter more. I think that the opening play was a good idea to have Josh Giddey start in the corner, start to be, of course, ignored in the corner, but J-Dub kind of drives to that side and draws out, of course, the attention of the guy supposed to be guarding Giddey. Giddey cuts behind the action. J-Dub hits him. Giddey missed the push shot, but it was a really, really good look. Generating more of those opportunities is something that, from a team standpoint, they can do to help Josh Giddey. Because putting him in a role where he's just standing in the corner isn't fair to anyone. It isn't fair to the rest of the roster because it makes their life harder, but it also isn't fair to Josh Giddey either, because that's just not his game. He's not going to play well in that role. He just isn't. So it's a long-winded way, because this is a long-winded conversation, to say, I still think the jury is out, but you're getting close to a verdict. There's only a few, jurors still deliberating here. But as long as they're deliberating, you can't give a verdict. As long as they are holding out hope and trying to work through the issues, you can't go to the bailiff yet. So put the hypothesis in. We all have them. It's very fair to question the fit long term, but also let the scientific process play out. Let the trial and errors go, which will happen for the next 30 games. As you get to see rotations tweak, as the roster gets shaken up a little bit, which we're going to talk about soon. It'll happen in the postseason, because to be fair to Josh Giddey, which I think can get lost at times, there are players who just magically start playing better in the playoffs and magically start playing better in big games. Josh Giddey, to his credit, had a huge game in New Orleans in a big spot in the play-in. Let's see what happens in a 7-game series. The race to being loud and first can oftentimes take away what basketball really is, and oftentimes take away from basketball discourse as a whole. I've made no mistake about what Josh Giddey's season has been to this point, and I've criticized him on this show today and also on the show in the past, and I think I've been very fair to Josh Giddey both ways. Against Detroit, I didn't think he deserved a lot of criticism for how they played against Detroit last week, but a lot of people did, and I was kind of on the opposite side of that. Today, he was clearly not good today. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But earlier this week, we talked about Josh Giddey. Like this has been a conversation that I feel like I've been very fair upon on each side, and I think that as long as you're keeping it within the bounds of what's happening, there is room for all types of questions and opinions about Josh Giddey, but you still have to keep the context of the big picture. There's nothing more to do, right? The trade deadline's passed. The rest of the season will play out. You're not going to play him 0 minutes, but it's also unfair to act as though, just because his name's getting called in the first five, whenever the lights are off and it's a party in the pregame, Josh Giddey's playing a career low in minutes right now. Josh Giddey, even with the injuries that they had recently, is still averaging 25 minutes a game, which is by far a career low. Yes, he's still getting introduced as a starter. The Thunder have been able to bench him down the stretch, and that I think gets easier as Gordon Hayward comes back from injury and is on the doorstep of returning after the All-Star break. That will make things easier. And overall, I think the Thunder have shown a willingness to pivot in game. Now, in this specific game, the numbers and minutes look out of whack because Josh Giddey only played 22 minutes, even though he was forced to eat the end of that game and play a lot of that fourth quarter whenever the game was already lost. But this game was just purely lost, basically from the first quarter. The Thunder made a couple runs in the middle quarters, but eventually fell flat in the end. But still, end of the day, we all have our take of what we think will happen with Josh Giddey, but I still think it's fair to everyone involved, the team and the player, to still let it play out and be comfortable letting it play out. Because the sneaky truth is that this is not a make or break year for the franchise. This is not a make or break year in the postseason. I think that the Thunder are talented enough to get past the first round, and once you get past the first round, anything can happen. You're at that point. You're now 30 more regular season games and possibly 7 more. You're dang near 40 games more from here to now. Then anything can happen to any team. So, I think that this season there's not a ton of pressure to win a championship. There should be no pressure to win a championship. You can afford the luxury of working things out and pivoting in a postseason series when you need to, and then reevaluating things in the summer. And I'm all for having those tough conversations in the summer. We've already had them on this show during the season. But it can all be true in the sense of it doesn't have to just only be Josh Giddey today that's drawing your ire. It can be the fact that they didn't come out prepared for an afternoon game again. It can be the fact that they didn't play defense again. It can be, in an afternoon game, it didn't have the same defensive intensity that they need. It can be the fact that Lou Dort didn't shoot well either. It can be the fact that all these other cases of Kenrich Williams was not good in this game. It can be the fact that they didn't go to Jay Will soon enough, or that Ousmane Dieng was not good in this game, although the majority of that came in garbage time. It can be a lot of different things. J-Dub had a relatively quiet game for his standards. He had 9 points in this game in 26 minutes, and he shot 40% from the floor. Even J-Dub did not play up to his par. It can all be true, and it is all true. And we'll talk about this game against the Kings after it happens. I think that the game against the Kings is interesting. For me, the Kings are such a good team and a talented team that I'm not leading the charge of that they have to win this game or they have to show that they're better than this, and so they have to go out there and get a statement win. But I think that they do have to play a much more competitive game. You can't go get blown out again. Even though the Kings are good, even though the Kings are an excellent team, and they have a lot of talent, you cannot go get blown out again. Since the Kings are so good, I'm not going to say it's a must-win game on February 12th against a team as good as the Kings, but you can't go 0-4 in embarrassing fashion in postseason. In afternoon play. There's just some sort of chutzpah that has to kick in at that point. So I think that this is a big game from the Kings' standpoint. And at the top, the Western Conference race is just incredibly tight. You're 4.5 games up of 5th place, so you have a pretty nice cushion on home court advantage. However, Thunder are 4th right now, but only a game back of 1, and only half a game back of seeds 2 and 3. So it's going to be topsy-turvy the rest of the way. So these games start to stack up, and if you can get a win against the Kings, who've been a bit of a thorn in the side for OKC, and then you play Orlando, even though it's on the road, last game before the All-Star break, on paper should win that game against Orlando, who's a very good young team, and place the Thunder tough. Last year they had a lot of good games last year from Orlando. The game with Franz at the low high post whenever Shea got the contest for the win. It was great. But nonetheless, I digress. You get 2 wins before All-Star break that can really start to change things for you as you get Gordon Hayward back. Speaking of, let's talk roster shakeups as the Thunder made a few roster moves. This is going to be talked about after we talk about our good friends over at Nissan. Nissan's great. Check out Nissan at shopnissanusa.com. And whenever you do, you're going to be able to get your hands on the 2024 Nissan Rogue, which is the perfect, perfect city drive car, but also it's great for the Great Escape because it has the built-in features that you need for your more adventurous side, but also the luxury side with the 12.3 HD touchscreen information system, with your Google Assistant, Google Play, Google Maps all already up to date and up there for you. It's the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. And then you can also check out the Nissan Pathfinder, which has room up to 8 with their expansive cargo capacity and their advanced abilities to kind of convert you back to a 4x4 car. So check it out today with their great horsepower as well. It's 284 horsepower on the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. And then the 2024 Nissan Armada is great too because it's the picture, it's the kind of living picture of what you need from a rugged 4x4 car, but with the everyday luxury of the class and that kind of first class like style of an 8-seater that you can really use to really class up the place. So check it out today and take the Nissan Rogue or the Nissan Pathfinder or the Nissan Armada to get your next big adventure started at shopnissanusa.com. That's nissanusa.com to shop there at nissanusa.com for your next car. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Listen, it's very hard to do a show after driving 6 hours. And I think that I've given this pod the same vocal energy as the Thunder played defensively and energized-wise. So I do apologize for that. But I think that it's led to some interesting enough conversations, especially whenever we're going to have our 7th pod of the week here in a couple hours after this Kings game. But the Thunder did check up their roster, and they signed Bismack Biyombo, who is a 6'8" big man, but he is a big man. His wingspan is huge. He's a beefy, big, especially comparatively to what the Thunder do have. So don't let his raw height fool you. He is actually a big man who can't shoot, but can do everything else. I think he's going to be a fine defender, especially as a rim protector in these pinch minutes. I think that he can rebound the ball really well. It can be a pick and roll man very well. Hits in the dunker spot as a safety net very well. He's in transition. He's on the glass. He will be a change of pace big. I don't think that he's going to be someone who starts or someone who plays heavy rotational minutes or someone who's a consistent part of what the Thunder are doing. But I think that this is the classic player who we talked about all this week leading up to the deadline of putting a tool in your toolbox. Like the ability to go to a guy like Biyombo is going to be vital come playoff time. You'd rather have the option than not. You'd rather be able to do something than just have to be forced to sit on your hands in the postseason. So I think that that's a really good pickup for Oklahoma City. Of course, it costs no assets other than sending him to the rest of the year. So that was really good for Oklahoma City. Also, they converted Lindy Waters to from a two-way to a standard contract. It is technically being called a multi-year deal again, which is just typical of how the Thunder kind of label things. But it's the same setup as his last season one was, where there's a team option and they can move on from him after this year, which I'd imagine they'll handle it the same way they did last year, where they let him play out the season on this standard contract, then they decline his option, and they reevaluate things. That's just a guess, but I would imagine that's kind of how it goes. But the Thunder also made a roster move to now fill a Lindy Waters spot. They've signed Adam Flagler, who has played really well for the G League in the OKC Blue this season. 12.4 points, 3.4 rebounds, and a stock per game. He shot 44% from the floor, but 40% from three and 90% at the charity stripe. Really good shooting touch, 43% on catch and shoot looks. Here's the big deal. He's awesome in transition, and he's really good as a creator for himself and others. He's really good as a pick and roll ball handler to really organize the Blue offense and help them jive and help them just score the basketball. Again, much like Biyombo, even more so than Biyombo, I should say, the pathway for actual NBA minutes is going to be few and far between, barring injuries. But if you did go into a pinch where, like, now that you've traded away Micic and traded away Trey Mann, where you're down a few ball handlers, he can really help. He was teammates with Jared Butler on that Baylor team, who they signed after they converted Lindy Waters last year. Same similar vein. Like Jared Butler, yeah, you liked going to Jared Butler in that Memphis game whenever they sat everybody. You like going to Jared Butler, whenever some injuries arose. Well, you only played him 6 games, and it was to the tune of 12 minutes per game, which was very much heavy lifting from that last game against Memphis last season. So I would not expect much from Adam Flagler at the NBA level. He's been an awesome player at the G League level. Let's see what happens, but I would not expect him to make a huge impact in the rotation, barring injuries. The thing with Flagler is he is one of the best options that if you did run into injuries, he could play your system very well, and it's more translatable to the NBA one-to-one than some of the other blue players who are playing really well right now. So that's where the Thunder stand on Adam Flagler. I think that he plays more physically, defensively than his size would indicate. So that's helped him kind of bridge the gap defensively. He's a really high feel for the game guy, which is going to be massive for the Thunder. And then he can really get hot from three. He's one of these guys who's not like he's not built as like a sharpshooter, and he's never going to be confused with a sharpshooter. I would say he's more of a streaky shooter, where like you could just look up and he's got 4 for 5, and he's got 6 for 8 night from three. Like, wow, what a game from Adam Flagler. So I think that he is one of the better options that you can get on a two-way deal because of what he brings to the table. You're not gonna, for example, a guy that I love is Caleb McConnell because he has NBA ready defense right now, and he could play at that level defensively in the NBA and play extremely well in that end right now. However, on the offensive end, you're only going to get 28% from three from him. He's a good cutter. He's a good dive man to the rim, but you're not going to use him as pick and roll man just due to his size. And as a cutter, you have a lot of redundancy there, and he'd be apt to be someone who gets left alone on an island that can't make you pay for it. And so when you're thinking about two-way guys, yes, I think that Caleb McConnell, of any player on the blue, has the most elite NBA seal. That's his defense. However, being realistic, he's only going to play at most, an 8-minute spurt here and there. And the league is so good and so talented that if you're only hanging your hat on defense, you're going to get scored on. Like, even if you're the best defender there is. I mean, like Lou Dort, for example, and this is not a good example today because they also had very many bad defense possessions. But Lou Dort, for example, had a possession against Luka where like he literally just almost shoulder bumped Luka. He was contesting it so hard and so well. But Luka still just splashed in a setback three. And that's textbook harassing defense where the offense is just better now in the NBA. So my point is, if you're a defender only who cannot provide much offensively, you're going to get scored on anyway, and the drop-off is there. So with Adam Flagler, the benefit to him over a guy like McConnell, who I like more, over a guy like KJ Williams, who I like, over a guy like Jamias Ramsey, who I like, would be what he can do offensively within the flow of your system. He's not going to let up too much defensively in terms of the drop-off from him and your other options, but he plays your style of offense better. Jamias Ramsey has made vast improvements with his three-point shot this year, which is really starting to change the way that scouts view him, although it's still a tough grind for him to do that in the NBA right now. But his bread and butter is still going to be attacking the rim as a ball-dominant player. You're not going to have your two-way guy doing that. Adam Flagler, though, the way that he scores is more repeatable, is more conducive to the Thunder style of play. So that's kind of why I think that they leaned Flagler in all of this. And they've liked Flagler this entire season. Of course, he had like a weird start to the G, which we can get into on another show. Maybe Lockdown G needs to happen so we can get all these stories. But he's been playing down the stretch of this year, and it's been really good for the Blue. And now we'll see what he can add to the Thunder. I'm curious to see, when and how much the Thunder want Flagler to be, to join the team, because they did have Olivier Sarr with them today. They did have Lindy Waters with him today, but Keontae Johnson and Flagler were both in Stockton with the Blue. Of course, the Flagler signing, even as of this moment right now, is not official by the team, so that also changes the rules and regulations. But if I had to guess, the earliest you'd see either Keontae or Flag on the Thunder bench would be Tuesday against Orlando. And at that point, you might just kind of have them reconvene post All-Star break because they're coming back from the West Coast trip and all that goes into that. So the Thunder will also host the Sioux Falls Sky Force, I believe is what their mascot is, on the 13th. So, you get some more run for them that day. So it'll be interesting to see kind of who they take to Orlando. Anyway, that was your Adam Flagler breakdown for those of you that were just dying to have it. That is the benefit to this podcast, is that even on days like today where you're kind of drained from a 6-hour road trip, no one else can break down the G like we can here at Locked On Thunder, and has this information ready for you off the cuff about guys like Adam Flagler, because we put the work in. So it's great to get to go down there, cover a game on the road. It's really fun, actually. You can ask more stories about that if you're interested. I just don't know how many people would be interested in my road trip ventures. But if you are, let me know. I'll have plenty of time. Talk about the roster shakeup. Talk about the Thunder game against the Mavs. Kings game. Gonna have a podcast right afterward. We yapped our way to 40 minutes. I can't believe it. I really apologize for that, but it is what it is. So appreciate anyone who's still listening to my voice right now. That is insane of you. Subscribe for free across all podcasting platforms so you never miss an episode, including on YouTube. And hit me up on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. And if you've made it to this very point, say Plaza somewhere. Twitter at Ryland_Styles, or on YouTube, whatever else. But until tomorrow, be good, and be good to one another.